Like our individual and market supply curves and our individual market and demand curves, aggregate supply curves and aggregate demand curves only become interesting when they are put on the same graph. Before looking at aggregate supply curves and aggregate demand curves on the same graph, we need to take a minute to review how economists like to create graphs. First, the horizontal axis, or the axis that runs back and forth across the slide, measures the amount of GDP and is often labeled with the letter Y for income. The letter Y is selected because the letter I, as you may recall, is used to indicate investment in the gross domestic product formula. You may also recall that the vertical axis that runs up and down is the price level, and this may be abbreviated with the letter P for price level. You may also remember that as we move from left to right, the numbers get bigger. Thus, as one moves from left to right, GDP increases. And finally, you may also recall that as we move from the bottom to the top, numbers get larger. Thus, as one moves upward from the bottom, the price level increases. A graph with an aggregate supply and aggregate demand curve has many of the same features as individual supply and demand curves on the same graph. First, there's a place where the aggregate supply crosses the aggregate demand curve, and this is called the equilibrium point. The equilibrium points are typically given the name E for equilibrium and assigned a number indicating how recent that particular equilibrium point is. In our graph, the equilibrium point is named E0. Second, if we were to draw a line from the equilibrium point to the left to the price axis, the equilibrium price level would be indicated on the graph. In our example, P sub 0 is the original price level. Third, if we were to draw a line from the equilibrium point to the income axis, the equilibrium income would be indicated on the graph. In our example, the income is Y0, which indicates this was the original income or GDP. Most of the basic ideas concerning this equilibrium from our supply and demand analysis also hold true for aggregate supply and aggregate demand analysis. For price levels that are above the equilibrium point, P sub 0, there will be a surplus. For example, at price level P1, the quantity supplied is YS, and that exceeds the demand YD, creating a surplus. For price levels that are below the equilibrium price level P sub 0, there will be a shortage. For example, at price level 1, the quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied, YS, creating a shortage.